David, thank you very much for your very kind, gracious introduction. Any of you listen to Prairie Home Companion? Yeah. So the Minnesota folks know I'm going to have, when I see Garrison on the street, I'm just going to have to say, you know, it was somebody said something very nice about me and I'm very sorry. the Norwegian Lutheran in my mom is like, okay, sit down, Betty, this, you know, quit while you're ahead. Thank you, David. But, you know, David probably is the only person in Washington who could get me up at 8 o'clock in the morning to give a speech. And the reason why is because of, you know, his friendship, his kind words, and he gathered a great group of people together to talk to at 8 in the morning. So, CAF leaders, you are, you're true leaders in our community. And I'm so happy to have you in Washington to bring that commitment and that passion here, because we really need it. And David really needs you out on the Hill. He's one of the hardest working people in Washington, and he does it because he cares about you, he cares about the job that you do, he cares about the people that you are out there helping every day, and so do I. And that's why I'm here this morning. We're a team. So, I want to just take a second and thank you, because sometimes that doesn't happen. I want to thank you for helping people build better and more sustainable futures for themselves and their families, and for our communities, and yes, for our nation. You care about the children and the families and the seniors and the low-wage workers who are struggling to meet their most basic human needs: food, safety, shelter, education, employment, and health care. And you're delivering direct services, managing programs, conducting research, and advocating for hard-working, low-income families. And so you're making a difference in the lives of so many people who are trying to overcome poverty. I believe in what you do, and I want you to have the resources and the flexibility and the partnerships to even do more. And it's because I believe so strongly in your work that I've joined with a Republican colleague from Pennsylvania, Mike Fitzpatrick, and I hope he was able to come over. We have several assignments. He's fabulous. And together, we worked to reauthorize CSGBG. And David's worked closely with us to craft the language to make the necessary reforms to keep the programs that you work on strong and successful for years to come. So, I was teasing somebody and I said, do you know the bill number? And David said, it's number 1. It does have a 1 in it. Yes, the first numeral is 1, which is good, right? So what's the number? 1655. Oh, you can do better than that. It's HR 1655. I think I might have to test you on that later. Well, it was introduced yesterday and we're excited about it. HR 1665 is a bipartisan bill. Co-sponsored. And we need to get it to the floor, pass it in the House, and then send it over to the Senate. So you have my commitment to work closely with David here, and with Mr. Fitzpatrick, Mr. Costa of California, Bob Goodlatte of Virginia, Virginia over here, and the other original co-sponsors of the bill. We need to get more members on board. We need your help in doing that. So as you finish up your outreach in congressional offices this morning and in the coming months, I want you to make sure that you call the district director, call the staff, get them invited out to visit your program so that they can meet the people, their constituents that they're providing services to. Will you all do that? All right. So your work at CAP agencies is really important, and members of Congress need to be able to see it. So it's just not a government program, right? It's delivering services to real people. Now, in authorizing this important legislation is important, because if we don't modernize, we're not growing, we're not learning. And so CAP agencies, we know, need flexibility, and Congress needs accountability. So we knew some reforms were needed. But we also need to have good outcomes, and we need to have innovation. After 51 years of fighting the war on poverty, you've had some great success. successes, but we need to strengthen CAP agencies for the next 50 years. The legislation will allow my CAP agency and Clarence Hightower and the board and the great staff at Community Action Partner of Ramsey and Washington counties to continue their models of successes. And where there are problems, like the situation we're currently facing in Minneapolis, action needs to be taken. The legislation provides for the needed reforms to ensure that CAP agencies and staff and board members will be trained and accountable. And with the hundreds of CAP agencies performing at high standards, gold star standards, you're out there meeting the needs of your communities, delivering real results for beneficiaries and for taxpayers. So we don't want one bad agency to fuel a political storm up here that can damage this program and all the great work you're doing. So reform and accountability were necessary. Another thing that's essential is innovation. So our bill creates an innovation fund to encourage thinking that's outside of the box. And last, when agencies need to merge or better serve their communities, it sets aside money in the bill to help with that important transition. So this is a good bill. In fact, it's a great bill. And you're going to help us make it into law. So thank you very, very much. We're in Washington, and this was a big week as some of you were trying to set up, appointments and that. All of a sudden, somebody like me is like, oh, I've got to vote. They grab a card and they run out the door. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I'm very concerned about the budget and the ability of Congress to make the needed investments to address the many, many needs facing our country. The House passed its budget this week, and I voted against it. As far as I'm concerned, it sets the wrong priorities for our country, for our families, and for our future. The majority party called this budget a victory because it balances the federal budget in 10 years. Now, it could have achieved that same goal by limiting tax breaks, but instead, they protected tax breaks. They could have increased revenue and made smart cuts in spending, but they didn't. Instead, they balanced this budget over 10 years by cutting $5.3 trillion from programs that serve low-income, hard-working Americans, the same Americans you serve. According to the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, 69% of this budget in the House, the cuts are achieved by cutting programs for low-income families. The budget repeals the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and takes health insurance away from 16 million Americans. The budget doesn't repeal sequestration, which continues to cut spending across the board. And domestic spending is on the chopping block, and it's bad news for families. It's my hope that the President and Republican leaders in Congress will strike a sensible budget deal later this year. And in fact, Tom was telling David and I that's his goal too. Because I do believe we can truly find common ground that avoids cuts to deeper domestic programs, keeps our economy strong, and keeps the government open. Now, I have some great Republican colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, as I said, who want to do the same thing that I do. They want to have a responsible level of spending that allows us to invest in America, in our people, and in our future. So, as far as I'm concerned, our job in government's about one thing, and it's about governing responsibly. And we need to stay focused on the challenges that real people face every day. So we need good roads and bridges. We need good schools. We need higher quality education opportunities to keep our economy strong. We need to advance in medical research and basic science funding. And we need community action agencies to meet the needs of our neighbors. I want to be real clear. These are not controversial or extravagant investments. They're just essential in keeping us in governing responsibly. But governing responsibly in Washington doesn't always win the day. Let me give you an example of something that we uncovered and I asked about yesterday. As David pointed out, I'm a member of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, which approves well over $500 billion in spending this year. It's an unbelievable amount of money. Imagine what you could do with that. So yesterday, I was at the hearing at the U.S. Army's budget, and I asked the Secretary of the Army about facilities around the country. And I was told that 25% of the Army's facilities are empty, unused, and that the Army is spending $500 million a year to maintain them. $500 million a year to maintain them. Guess what? The Army wants to close these facilities, but Congress refuses to allow them to be sold or transferred. In fact, I asked the Secretary of the Army for a list of all these unused or empty facilities. He looked at me and he told me he couldn't provide me that list because the language of last year's defense reauthorization bill prohibits him from collecting such a list and giving it to Congress. You should have seen the look on the other defense appropriator's face. I think we might try to do something about that. But you know, that's just one remarkable example of irresponsible governing. We have members of Congress who are out there protecting empty buildings at the cost of $500 million a year, and then turning around and cutting programs for hardworking, low-income, poor families. So just think what you could do with $500 million. You would almost triple the budget. So folks, we don't need people in Congress funding empty buildings. We need people in Congress standing with our families, our kids, our seniors, and our workers, and with immigrants, and with every man and woman willing to build a better future for themselves and our country. Congress needs to be standing with you, and you have an opportunity to do that with H.R. 1655. That guy's law. So, I just want to thank you for inviting me here this morning. I want to thank you for all that you do. Keep up the good work, keep up the advocacy, keep making a difference, and let's get together reauthorizing CSGB, and that is happened by passing H.R. 1655. Thank you.